I'm not just a user. I'm a big fan, and you're right. We can actually use the word pleasure. That it can be a pleasure to use. I think back in the days of using different brand Windows PCs, people they don't share that same level of passion. It seems.
Welcome to Macpreneur, the show for seasoned solopreneurs looking to streamline their business on a Mac. Unlock the secrets to saving time and money with your host and technology mentor, Damien Schroers.
Hello. Today I have the pleasure to introduce Mark Graban. Mark is an internationally recognized author, speaker, and consultant. His latest book, The Mistakes That Make Us, Cultivating a Culture of Learning and Innovation, is a recipient of the prestigious Shingo Publication Award. Mark is also the author of Lean Hospitals and Healthcare Kaizen, both also Shingo recipients, as well as Measures of Success, React Less, Lead Better, Improve More. He serves as a consultant through his company, Constancy Inc. Additionally, Mark hosts podcasts including Lean Blog Interviews and My Favorite Mistake. Mark is also a senior advisor to the software company KaiNexus. Mark, welcome to the show.
Damien, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. What's your current Mac setup?
So I am on a MacBook Pro 14-inch M3. I had been a MacBook Air user for probably 5 or 6 years, probably 2 MacBook Airs, and then I switched over to the MacBook Pro. I don't find the MacBook Pro to be very heavy at all, and I'm on the go a lot, so I like the additional power and the ports of the MacBook Pro. I'm in my office right now, so I've got a docking station with an external monitor, external microphone, things I need plugged into it. And when I'm on the go, I make a lot of use of my iPhone. I appreciate a lot of the integrations between the iPhone and Mac. I have an iPad that I use mostly as a news and ebook reader. I don't use the iPad a lot for business, other than for one use that I'll bring up later on for one of your later questions. But yeah, I mean, I've been all in on the Apple ecosystem the whole time I've been a solopreneur, which is going on about 15 years.
Yeah, if we go back to the lightness of the MacBook Pro or the latest MacBook Pro, it's incredible. I have the 14-inch, but the M2 Pro, and being able to just hold it with one hand going around the house, it's really a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm not just a user. I'm a big fan, and you're right. We can actually use the word pleasure. That it can be a pleasure to use. I think back in the days of using different brand Windows PCs, people they don't share that same level of passion. It seems.
And so, what made you transition actually from a Windows PC to the Mac? And what was your first Mac?
Yeah, so my first Mac. This is before I went solopreneur, but I was using that computer. It was a black plastic. I think it was just called MacBook at the time. I mean, it had the spinning hard drive. It was probably a 13-inch screen. I was using that as I was doing things outside of regular work, where, like, as an engineer through college, Windows PC was the standard, and in workplaces, Windows PC was the standard. Now, I grew up an Apple kid. I mean, I'm old enough. Elementary school, we had Apple II Plus, Apple IIe. I always enjoyed when I got to use a Mac during high school. Yeah, actually, then during high school, I had an Apple II GS, which was almost a Mac, but color screen and real good graphics and sound. But when I started realizing, I'm blogging and I was starting podcasting, I'm like, I should do it on my own machine. And I think I partly bought into the Steve Jobs notion of it just works. I don't have an IT department. I think I've only had one hardware issue in 15 years that was serious enough to require any sort of service where I didn't have my computer. I mean, there's things that can be improved and things that do get improved, but it's solid. It's just, it works. They're reliable. Even though I tend to upgrade every couple of years, they last a really long time. And even that time when I needed Apple Store Genius Bar service, I was out of commission for a couple of days. I got a loaner laptop. So I feel like even as a small business buyer, it just works. And if there's any sort of problem, it gets taken care of. So I think that was a big part of it. And I just enjoy the Mac system, just how it works. For a while, when I was using both Windows and Mac, those differences, I think, were more immediate and in front of me every day. I get strangely, I think I'm very tech savvy. I grew up with computers, but nowadays, if I have to use a Windows computer for a couple of minutes, I feel all kinds of disoriented. Like it seems like it shouldn't be, but it is. So I'm a loyal Mac user, and it served me in my business really well. Yeah, so it just works. It's not perfect, but it just works.
So since you've been using it for quite a long time, what's your take on the evolution of macOS over the years?
I'm happy with the evolution of macOS. I think there's some people that get concerned that it's going to be made too much like iOS. And maybe I'm an old school enough user. I couldn't imagine using an iPad as a replacement for a Mac. Even as I've started using, I've shifted away from using Dropbox to using iCloud files, and I've gotten better. If I find it easier if I need to pull up a file to review or look at it quickly on my phone or on an iPad, I can do that. I think I'm more happy about how the hardware, I would say it devolved maybe for a generation or two, and then got back to some of the best features and continued to evolve a little bit. Like I had a touch bar MacBook Pro, did not really find that feature lived up to the hype. It was more of a gimmick than anything really helpful. So I use my function keys a lot, even if it's just for adjusting volume. And I appreciate that I can do that without really even having to look. I'm not a big fan of touchscreen interfaces in cars either. So I'm glad that they got rid of the touch bar, that they brought back a built-in HDMI port. When I'm on site as a speaker or a consultant, just being able to pop the HDMI directly in, it's just better than dealing with the adapter. And then I think the other thing I was most happy about was when they brought back the MagSafe charger. Because again, I'm clumsy. I'm often using my computer, even if I'm at home sitting at a table somewhere. And even though the battery life is great, there's times I have to plug it in. And the MagSafe adapter has saved me, I'm sure, from many, many repairs, trips to the Apple store, and being without my laptop. So I was always scared in that generation when it was only the USB-C charger. I never had a MacBook hit the floor, but there were some closer calls, and it just always made me really stressed out. So I'm happy that in a way Apple went back to some of the best features, and I think a lot of it doesn't need to evolve. I mean, I think the basic form factor of these MacBook Pros doesn't at all look out of date. I think the designs are pretty classic, and they hold up and still look really modern for what that's worth. But functionality wise, I like iOS. I don't have any, or Mac OS, I'm sorry. I don't have any major beefs with it. Maybe a few improvement ideas, maybe we can talk about later on.
Yeah, so for the listeners who still have the older generation MacBook Pros, and also the 12-inch MacBook, when the M1 was released, it was also at the time USB-C charging. I have found, I have two teenagers, and one of them is pretty, not clumsy, but she doesn't really take care of her stuff. And what I found is it's a cable, a normal USB cable, but on one side, there is a magnet thing. So the USB-C plug gets into the MacBook, stays into the MacBook, and then the other part of the cable just magnetically attaches.
yeah, these different products get created to make up for some of the
Mm,
hardware shortfalls. I remember the first time I had to deal with a very USB-C oriented MacBook was when I got that loaner
mhm,
from Apple. My MacBook at the time still had the USB-A ports, and I thought having to use the
mhm,
adapter, the dongle for everything, I thought was ridiculous. I thought this was not a step forward. But then when you really then have the machine of your own, you buy USB-C cables and like I rarely need some sort of dongle adapter with all the ports on the MacBook Pro. That's another reason I think it's a better fit for me than the MacBook Air. But again, like just being able to plug in the HDMI
mhm,
directly for me is just really beneficial.
mhm. To circle back a little bit on what you touched upon, the iOSification of the Mac, it's partly due to the processor architecture, so the fact that they have now their own Apple Silicon chips. It
Right.
actually allows them to improve the security and to
Hmm.
mimic the boot process and some of the things, some of the security measures that they've implemented for the iPhone, they are actually putting them down on the Mac. And something that I discovered recently that actually I'm not I'm not a big fan of is, so with any Mac you can do a clone of your internal hard drive. And that's
Hmm.
pretty useful if the internal drive fails, right? You can
Hmm.
quickly pop the drive in, boot, and you're good to go.
Hmm.
Except that's something I didn't know and I discovered recently was that actually it doesn't work for the Apple Silicon MacBooks or
Mm.
Macs
Because of
because
security.
of security. Yeah. So there
Yeah.
were two things that they implemented. One that I knew immediately was the fact that whenever a MacBook or a Mac with an Apple Silicon chip gets released, you cannot install a previous version of macOS, a version of macOS before the one when the Mac was released. Whereas
Mm.
with an Intel machine, and I had done that for some of my clients, they bought a very new Intel Mac. It had the latest version of macOS full of bugs. I would just wipe
Hmm.
the drive, install the
Yeah.
previous version of
Yeah.
macOS, and here we go. We cannot do that with Apple Silicon Macs, and we cannot boot an Apple Silicon Mac from an external drive if the internal drive has failed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, from a security perspective, it's good, but from a productivity
Yeah.
perspective, yeah, not that good.
I mean, since we shifted from spinning hard drives to the solid state drives, I have far less concern about that, but I still use three different backup
Mm-hmm.
methods constantly running, which is maybe an old habit from the days when it wasn't a matter of if a hard drive would crash, but
Mm-hmm.
when. So I don't worry about it as much, but I've got these backup habits where it's more likely I might get my laptop
Mm-hmm.
stolen than have it fail. So I'm happy to have all sorts of cloud backup
Mm-hmm.
and time machine backup options going on. Get back in business sooner than
Yeah.
later.
Let's go to the next section of the show and let's talk about the applications that you use on your Mac, whether they are from
Mhm.
Apple or third-party developers.
Yeah. So with podcasting, and as I've started doing more with video the last 5 years, like I found the built-in standard iMovie is sufficient for everything I need to do. I don't need anything fancier or more expensive. I don't need Final Cut Pro. I'm not doing anything that sophisticated. But to be able to do basic editing on a podcast video or another video, to be able to do just the basic sound tweaking and adjustments, iMovie works well for me. So I spend a lot of time working in there. I've never really used GarageBand.
Mm-hmm.
I used to use some free open source software. And actually, I back in Windows days, I was using it. It's called
Mm-hmm.
Audacity. I thought it was a very good sound wave editor and again, free. But maybe 6, 7 years ago, I started using paid software called Hindenburg, which is designed, it's used not only by podcasters, but it's used by radio journalists, programs that do kind of like longer form documentary radio programs. And there's a lot of great podcasting features. So I've been using that. I tried GarageBand, and I just found that Hindenburg was worth the money. But if somebody wanted a free alternative, it seems like Audacity still works really well. And that doing all the things, I think Hindenburg's a little bit better with some of the auto volume adjustments, noise removal. It's multi-track editing. So I generally have myself and my guest in different tracks. I have an intro music, bumper music. So Hindenburg, I spend a lot of time in that application as well. And then I'm in the built-in Mac Mail and Mac Calendar applications quite a bit throughout the day too. In fact, my second screen usually just has my calendar on display full time. And by second screen, I mean I'm like at my desk. I've gotten in the habit now of positioning things to where I've got my built-in screen on the MacBook Pro, and then I've got a 27-inch monitor up above it directly.
Yeah, I didn't know about Hindenburg. I will have a look at that, and I will anyway put links to all the apps that you mentioned in the show notes. Does it have any transcription built in?
There is a higher priced, that might be the Hindenburg Pro, has some of that built in, but I've kind of had my habits of using web-based tools for doing podcast transcriptions. But that is one of the features that is available at the higher tier of Hindenburg. Yeah.
Okay. So when the Macpreneur podcast was audio only, I was using Audacity, and I found it really easier to use, especially with keyboard shortcuts, compared to GarageBand. GarageBand is more for music production than for podcast editing. And when I switched to a video format, I went with Descript, which does the transcription on the fly. And then it allows me to edit the podcast from the text. It's not super precise. The transcription is not perfect. Sometimes it hallucinates. it makes up sentences that neither I nor the guest have spoken.
Oh, that's concerning.
It's really, I really have to go through the thing. But the nice thing is I go 175x or 2x through the entire podcast, and I can really quickly catch the hallucinations.
Yeah, I haven't had that happen. I mean, I've been using, most recently, they renamed themselves. It used to be called Toasty. It's like Toasty.ai. I'm still trying to get used to their new name. Let me look this up. They are now, forgive the pause, they're now called Outcast. .ai. But it's funny, I don't think it's hallucinating sentences. But even though it's supposedly AI, it always spells my name incorrectly. It is not able to learn for some reason. So I mean, yeah, it's software. I don't know if it's really AI. It doesn't seem to be machine learning. And even though it does prompt you to type in the name of the host and the guest, and it still spells my name consistently incorrectly. But that's easier to fix than it is to do a transcription yourself. I couldn't imagine doing my own transcription.
Yeah. So if the listeners, they are looking for a private transcription system, AI-based transcription system, meaning it's done on the device, on the MacBook. It never goes to any server. There is a nice application called Mac Whisper, and there is a free version, but with limitations. I have paid for the license because it's so good. I think the limitations are on the model. So you actually download the models locally on your Mac, and there are very small models like 500 megabyte for the model, but then you have up to 3 gigabyte models, and you only get those more precise models if you pay for the but they are pretty good, and actually they are much better than Descript The thing is, you cannot do any editing. Right? It's pure transcription. And you can also you can also copy paste a URL, a YouTube URL or Vimeo URL, and it will transcribe the thing. And what I like about Mac Whisper is that they have introduced AI post transcription prompts, built-in prompts. And so, for instance, there was like a webinar. It was on YouTube. I just paste the link, make the transcription, and then there is a prompt, create an FAQ. And it will then go through the transcript and extract all the questions and answers and give them as a summary in a bulleted format. It's really neat. Or you can ask for the key points or have a quick summary of the video. And for that part, either you can use a local model, a local large language model, or you can also put your OpenAI API key. I don't know if they are now linked with Claude as well, but I have an OpenAI API key, so I put mine. So that part obviously goes through the OpenAI servers, but the transcription is totally private and local.
It would be nice if that was part of Apple Intelligence in the future, to be able to do that locally. That would be nice.
Yeah. Very good. So let's go to the next section of the show. What tip or trick did you discover on your Mac recently that you wished you knew before?
It wasn't very recently, but I maybe within the past year realized how easy it was to use when I'm on the go, how easy it is to use an iPad as a second screen. And so I've been doing that much more if I'm in a hotel room or even on site with a client, just to have the additional screen real estate. The fact that it seems to be, I think it could be easier. Well, I think I figured out a better way to launch it through the Mac settings, through the Mac display settings of clicking the plus and bringing in the iPad as a second screen. But that's one of those things, once you start doing it, I think, well, gosh, I should have been doing this. I should have been doing this before, because I remember there was an era where I think you needed to, I'm trying to think the name of it, but it was a separate app that you had to download, and you could use your iPad as a second screen. But once Apple built that in to macOS and iPad OS, I'll go back to the Steve Jobs phrase again, it just works. And it's smart enough. If I remember right, I think it's even smart enough to know which side the iPad is on. So the cursor just sort of magically goes across to where the iPad's sitting. So that's a feature I use a lot. And then I don't know if this is so much a tip or a trick, but I had the external keyboard. Those last a very long time. I had one of the external Bluetooth Apple keyboards for probably at least 12 years. And now that we've been in a Touch ID platform for a while now, I finally splurged and upgraded the keyboard to the Touch ID. And that's a big time saver and frustration saver. Even though, the Touch ID button is there on the MacBook Pro, having it handy right there, I found to be a big benefit. I don't know if that's a tip, but that's a piece of hardware that I've been happy to kind of build into my office setup.
Yeah, it's a capability that only works with Apple Silicon Macs, right? So that's one of the perks of the new era. So even if I would buy, because I still have in front of me the last Intel iMac, the 27-inch iMac, even if I bought that latest keyboard from Apple with the Touch ID, I wouldn't be able to use. But maybe, for some people who are in the same situation as me, the trick is the Apple Watch, because it can be used to unlock the Mac, and so that's how it's the workaround. Because there are also applications like 1Password, and also in Safari when you want to enter the credit card or autofill passwords. Touch ID is super useful. Now, in my case, I have my watch, which taps a little bit, and I have to double click the side button to allow the transaction via the Apple Watch. Very good. We're almost at the end of the show. So if you were in charge of the Mac division at Apple, what would be your first priority?
The first thing I think would be something not to do. Like, I don't think I want a touchscreen MacBook, maybe for a number of reasons. So my wife has a touchscreen Windows PC that she uses for work. And then if she's ever looking at something on my MacBook, I think she's gotten in such the habit of the touchscreen that she tries doing that on my Mac and she smudges up my screen. And then in reverse, I forget and I put my hand close to her touchscreen Windows PC and I'm not tapping or moving or activating things because I'm so used to not touching the screen. You see all these different innovative designs, the Windows PC world. Would I want a MacBook Pro where the screen swivels and folds back into itself to be like a tablet? And you're like, I could see some people wanting that, but that wouldn't be a huge priority for me. I think for those of us who are on the go, even with the ubiquity of Wi-Fi, I could see from a security standpoint the appeal of built-in cellular. And I do use my iPhone as a wireless hotspot, and that works pretty seamlessly. But I know there are Windows PCs out there, and even look at the iPads with built-in cellular. I think that would have some interesting use cases to not have to rely on Wi-Fi, and especially if you're in areas with 5G or 5G plus, that's actually, I think, faster than a lot of public Wi-Fi. So that would be another thing that I think I actually would take advantage of, would be built-in cellular data.
Yeah, that's something that the blog that I follow, the Mac pundits that follow the news a little bit more closely, that's basically their hope, because Apple purchased the cellular division of, I don't remember now which company, but basically they have the engineers, they have the know-how to build their own 5G or 4G modem. And that would be great because, some Windows laptops already have that. And even though, it's possible to use the iPhone, but it's not the same. It's not the same, especially if you have some limits on your cellular plan on the iPhone, which is the case for me. Yeah, it's a good point. Well, thank you very much for sharing how you are using your Mac to run your business. Where can people find you online, Mark?
So thank you, Damien. My website is markgraban.com. And then LinkedIn is the platform I'm also pretty active on, as LinkedIn has become, I guess, a social media platform. So those would be the two places I would suggest.
Yeah, perfect. I will put a link in the show notes for everyone. And so if, like Mark, you would like to share how you are using your Mac to run your solopreneur business, it's simple. Just visit macpreneur.com/apply. If you are already on Podmatch, just click on the button and you will land on the show profile. Otherwise, fill the application form and I will get back to you within a few days. Once again, it's macpreneur.com/apply. In the comments below, please share your main takeaway from this episode. And if not done yet, please subscribe to my channel so you'll get more helpful tips on how to run your business on your Mac. And until next time, I'm Damien Schreurs, wishing you a great day.
Thank you for watching the Macpreneur podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave a comment and share it with a friend right now.